We're about to get started. First off, Jen, is it time to start? Now is when I start?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Jen. All right, we have this thing where Jen tells me when I'm allowed to talk, so that's how this works. I'd also like to thank Jen for reminding us all to be appropriately branded, which Jen forgot earlier today, so we all got to give her grief about the fact that we are appropriately branded. And I'd also like to thank the dev team members who are appropriately branded. Raise your hands. These are people that helped build this silly thing, right? So thank you for being here. So this is a really weird talk, and I got to admit I'm really nervous about it. The reason I'm really nervous about it is I'm going to say things in here that make people mad. I'm going to say things in here that make me mad. I'm going to say things in here that are critical of our IT. I'm going to say things in here that are also praising our IT, praising IGM, praising Magic, praising most particularly the students that did this. But there is both pleasure and pain in the making of things. And in this particular instance, there is a lot of pleasure and a lot of pain in the making of this thing. And the one thing that I'm trying to do with all of our post-mortem talks is to be as weirdly honest as possible. So this is from the heart, and this is over-prepared nervousness about everything that has gone into the last 18 months of doing this. So I hope that you will take it in the spirit that it was intended. It is purposefully raw. With that, if you're ready, we will do it. Ready? Ready. Woo! Yay. Okay. I have a little plastic knife. All right, so hi, my name is Andy. I make things. I think I know everybody, most folks here, but if you don't know me, I'm the guy that runs the Magic Center. So first off, welcome friends. This is an evening of what we did, where we succeeded, where we failed, some lessons for the future, and some Q&A. And like I just said, there are no closet skeletons in this particular talk. So when this talking about this game is wrapped up in talking about Magic and what we're trying to do at Magic in the first place and what this was all about. When we very first made Magic, we did this thing that nobody understood, which was we said that there were some things that we were going to do that were research and academic, and that was a research center, but there were some things that we wanted to do that were specifically around dealing with the commercial world, specifically around game publishing and media publishing and all that stuff. And we made a publishing studio. Oh, okay. So we made a publishing studio around this, right? Because we said there are certain companies in the world that won't even deal with the university, and there are some things that the university just does poorly. So we're going to make a studio so that we can do the things we want to do. And that has resulted in a lot of success. And when I look back on my career and the career that I've had with the very lovely people that I've been, able to work with, we have a lot of firsts and a lot of success at RIT in this space, right? I taught the first graduate course in games at RIT. It was so new that the New York Times showed up to cover my course because they were like, I can't believe anyone is actually doing this, right? This was like 2002, right? First undergraduate course in concentration in game design and technology. First degree program in the Northeast in game design and development. Might have been first in the country had we moved a little quicker. First department, first school in this space, right? Other schools look to us and say, why did you make a department? How did you make a department? How did you get people to sign off on you making a department? So on. First university to ship on Xbox. And so right away, I'm taking what we're doing, what we're talking about tonight, and I'm equating it to some of those other firsts. Because I think it's that big a deal. Right? There's lots of other firsts wrapped up in those firsts. Right? So we're having this huge outsized effect on the brand of the university. If you look back over the last year, Magic is something ridiculous, like a quarter of all of the press that went out of the university. It's absurd. Right? It makes no logical sense. Right? Yeah, so it's a huge thing. What you don't see is all of the failure, because we don't brand it and advertise it, right? But there's a ton of failure, right? I go to work every day and stuff breaks, right? And we do things differently and that causes a lot of friction, right? Having a commercial studio on an academic campus causes a lot of friction, right? Jen gets beat up all the time with the, this is not how we do things here, etc., right? And so what we think is important sometimes is undervalued elsewhere, and what other people think is important, we sometimes undervalue. Sometimes I like to think that, you know, if we see our work as work, then we've kind of failed. But sometimes it really feels like work. So we fail sometimes. And we're often afraid. And we're often alone. There's a $20 million effort hanging over this building, and there are 4 people that are sort of responsible for it. And we're feeling that a lot. The one that we cite publicly is that Angry Birds is the 52nd game by the group that made Angry Birds, right? So you've never heard of the first 51, right? Failure is a part of the creative process. Fail forward, fail fast. Wow. Magic is now on its 3rd incarnation. We've not so quietly, but not super publicly, rebranded what we're doing with Magic several times over, because the first couple of times didn't click. A nicer way to say that is that the M is for messy. Right? We make messes. We screw up. What you're about to see is us making messes and screwing up, just as much as it is succeeding. So with that as kind of a background, I want to get into the game that we made, how we made it, and what went. Yes, no. So what is Hack Slash and Backstab? Right? So Hack Slash and Backstab is a multiplayer arcade dungeon crawler with a twist. We've been there. Stack ranking. You an RIT employee? We've experienced stack ranking. Lucky you. Team project. Are you an RIT student? Great. Have you taken a class that's graded on a curve? Lucky you. So on and so forth, right? So it's a game about the fact that we are often put in situations where a team has to succeed, and yet at the same time, we often evaluate individuals and not teams. And that those two things are fundamentally misaligned. And so it is a game based around a broken mechanic. It is a game based around the fact that these two things are slipshod, and when they are, lots of really weird and nasty things occur. Right? But we put it in a whimsical space with cartoon characters, right? And lots of particles and plastic knives so that people can feel better about it as they experience it. It was in the news. You've probably heard something about this game. In fact, if you haven't heard about this game already, we have failed. And there she is, right? So Jen's job is to make sure that we all know about this game and we've all heard about this game, and Jen looks like Molly, and the thing in the game is pink, and the thing that Xbox sends us is pink, and so pink, right? Yay! So I promised her that I would make fun of her tonight, and she's like called me out as not going to do it. So there you go, Jen. Game on. All right, part 1. Where did this come from, and what did we actually do? So where this came from is probably the darkest part of the whole talk. So this tale begins with the tale of 2 noble houses, if you're into Game of Thrones. And those noble houses are IGM and Magic. So way back in the day, I used to run IGM. In fact, I founded IGM. I founded it with that guy and a whole bunch of other people that are in this room. And I loved it. It was the single most important thing to me outside of my nuclear family and my children. I not so jokingly referred to it as my 3rd child. We hired an administrator that did not agree with any of the values that I held dear for what it should be and what it should aspire to. And over the course of a year and a half, I became so disillusioned with the university that I quit that job. That was one of the hardest decisions that I ever made. And it took me 18 months to make it. And I had lots of conversations with senior faculty, with different folks that I knew inside and outside of the university. I went back to my graduate advisor and talked to him about it. Countless conversations with my wife and other members of my family, so on. But eventually came to the conclusion that one of the best things I could do for IGM was to leave, because that would set in motion at least a discussion around what that department needed in order to survive and flourish. A couple of years went by, and eventually the university changed administration, and I thought there was an opportunity to kind of get the band back together. I was excited about that because I kind of missed my old friends. And they did not see it that way. And that hurt. That broke my heart in a way that I still have not recovered from, and I don't know that I ever will. And what happened at one of those meetings was I was called on the carpet as not caring about that group, as not having the best interests of that group at heart, and not thinking forward in being engaged with the future of where they wanted to go. And when I sat back and I looked at that over time, I began to notice a couple of things. And one of the things that I noticed was that they felt betrayed by my making magic. They assumed that I created magic before I left, that I had it in my back pocket. Right? I didn't, but that was the assumption, that I had sold them out. Likewise, I looked at some of the people raising the biggest objections to getting the band back together, and it were the people that kind of personally benefited from keeping the poles apart. And it was individuals looking at individuals in part, perhaps instead of the whole. Because in a system that rewards individuals, that's what individuals will do. And that got me to thinking that that's not unique to this particular situation of IGM and Magic. That's actually something that happens a lot in a lot of the situations that I just talked about. It happens in stack rank. It happens in collaborative projects. It happens every time where you need a team to succeed, but you talk about the individual and not the team. I will never look at professional sports exactly the same way. And so I took how I felt about that, and I did the only thing that I've ever known how to do in dealing with things that I think are difficult to deal with. I made art. And I came up with this idea for this crazy game to illustrate the way that I felt about this situation, rightly or wrong. And then I gave them little cartoon faces because I thought I wanted to inject some humor to kind of save my engagement with this. I wanted to inject some humor so that people could reflect on this without constantly like being bogged down in it, right? To understand it intellectually and not just emotionally. So I created these little guys. And we had just come off as a studio, we had made a game a year prior. We had made this game called Splatter Shmup that was about teaching people about the experience of a Jackson Pollock painting. And art games are unique in the sense that they are by definition personal. I don't think you can make art without it being personal to you, right? But they also, at the same time, have to be resonant with something that is a broader experience than just what you're talking about, right? You can't just say, here's how I felt on a canvas and not worry about whether anyone else can interpret it. From my perspective, I think that art is about putting yourself, having some empathy with the audience that's engaging with your work. And so I have a particular interest in what I call experiential educational games, which is an educational game that doesn't beat you over the head with the fact that it's educational, right? It's not, we're gonna play a game about history, and then we're gonna take a test on that history, and whatever, right? I want you to think about something different purely by the act that you've played a thing, right? That and only that, right? And so with this game, I had something to say, even if it wasn't particularly kind. I didn't like myself, I didn't like the situation, I didn't like anybody else, I didn't like the reaction, but I wanted a way to express that people could reflect on it and possibly think differently or more critically about some of the roles that we put ourselves in. So that was summer. And I got busy. And I said, Summer, we're going to make this game. So we started pre-production, and we started thinking and planning and sketching, and I worked with this guy, Aaron. Hi, Aaron. And we'll get to Aaron's role a little later. But I worked with Aaron, and we said, there's something deep and dark, but also could be fun and interesting and engaging about all of this. Let's try it. Right? And we did a lot of work in prepping for the fact that we thought this could be a fun experience. We thought this was the right scope. We thought we could whittle this down to something that we could achieve approximately in a semester. It's a fun joke now. So we started pre-production and we did a bunch of work. And then we had a not only class project, right? So right on the heels of both the success and the failure of Splatter Shmup, we did our second production studio, research studio, thing that nobody could figure out the name of, around making a game in a class. And we wanted to do something amazing. We wanted to elevate the bar of what we could achieve, right? So I went out and tried to background recruit a bunch of folks. I talked to Colin and I said, which students do you know? And which ones are really good, right? And I'll like shoot them a note on the fly, right? This kind of stuff. Then I talked to a couple of the advisors and I said, hey, is there anybody like really good at X, right? And whatever. And that mostly did not work. Because they each knew little pockets of people, but there's not like a centralized recruiting network to say, I need a 3D artist across this, right? One thing we did do is I decided that I was going to use a little bit of my funny Monopoly money, my RIT Monopoly money, and I was going to hire our first ever full-time production manager, right? Because we did it the year prior in Splatter Shmup where we took a student in the class and made them the production manager. And you get exactly what you would expect to get, which is we got great work from somebody for whom that was 1/5 of their responsibility for their academic load. So we said that didn't work. So we're going to hire somebody that is full-time, dedicated, eat, sleep, breathe, make this thing. This is their co-op, right? And so we went down this road and we said we're going to build this thing. So our in-class schedule looked about like this, right? Which is challenge design early. We pushed for a playable as soon as humanly possible, right? I think I asked for one in week 1 and we got it in week 2, right? And it was like little cubes, right, that you could move around. It was like not impressive at all, but it worked to point out the fact that you could in fact play this thing, right? We got a really good one in about week 3.5, right? Because it had like little people, and they didn't like move their legs or anything. It sort of slid around the floor, but you could actually like do it. And so at that point we went, this is weird and kind of fun, but we played it for the first time like really, really early, right? Week 3, week 4, right? And then there was a bunch of stuff that started that sort of continued as themes, right? One was we should bounce back and forth between this, like, I'm going to backstab you and run through the portal to win the game, and we're all working as a team. And folks wanted some way to sort of trade back and forth between I hate you mode and you're my friend mode, right? Like, how does that work? And the other one was strategically, it's kind of to your advantage to know when to throw that lever, right? Like, you know the end is right there. Like, I think I can live this long, and if you only think you can live this long, right, then I'm going to, like, stab you and run. So there was that. So we did a lot of work. We made a lot of characters. They were very pretty. I think that's, wait, Jim, Joe, right? So we had all these crazy ideas, right? We were gonna have enemies like come up from pits and like climb down the things, and it was gonna be like really grand and so on. Turns out making little characters is really hard. We had this really skilled 3D artist named Jason, who's not here because he went and got a job. Jerk. Yeah. And then, this was the other part of our schedule. So this is Rob. This is one of my favorite pictures of Rob. Rob was our project manager. The title to this lovely little image is Trick or Treat, the build doesn't work. Which was Halloween, which was the only time the build didn't work on presentation day. And it was made pretty clear that presentation day the build was going to work, bar none. But what we did was we set up this system where Wednesday to Wednesday was sprint period, right? And so Mondays we would wrap up and complete features. Tuesdays were all about taking everybody's work, merging it, integrating it into the current build. Wednesdays they presented to Aaron and I for crit, for feedback, for tasking. After class on Wednesdays, we would meet with all the team leads, which I'll talk about what a team lead was in a minute. And then Thursdays through Sundays were sort of core production. And on Fridays, those were in-class work days where folks could ask Aaron and I questions, Q&A. We sometimes organized our playtests on Friday when we organized them on the right day. Other times it was kind of catch and catch can. And Monday through Friday were when Aaron and I had our hands on the game. But most importantly, Rob had his hands on the game every single minute of every single day. I can't think of a time when I walked in that lab and Rob didn't have a controller in his hand playing a silly thing over and over and over again. And all of the folks on this team are like, yep. And then he would email or task every single person, like, I did this and it did this, I did this and it did this, I did this and it, to the point where we were all kind of sick of Rob. Gotta be honest, right? But Rob made this his life because we asked him to. So he was a good PM in that way. In terms of structure, right? So there's me and kind of the core Magic team, right? My CTO, Chris, my operations manager, Brenda, who apparently has kids and a life and wonderful home. My creative director, Aaron, right? And my communications officer, Jennifer, which is why you know about the game, because of Jennifer. And then our project manager, Rob, and then we had an art team, a dev team, an audio team, and a UI UX team. And each of those were student groups within the class. Each of those had a lead, right, that was responsible for coordinating across the others and then working together, right? In terms of the tools and technologies that we used, it is a Unity game. We built it with Unity. We'll talk more about what that exactly means. It's also a Google Docs game. Right? We have 28 gigabytes of Google Docs of what this game is. Right? Every week, everything we ever did was written down, processed, stuck in a build, and put in a week-by-week, day-by-day folder inside of our repository. And our repository, based on RIT, is hosted outside of RIT. We used the plugins Magical, Rewired, iTween, and Closing Credits. Jason used a ton of ZBrush and Maya, and his team, he incorporated that into their workflow. Rob liked GIMP, because it ran on his gimpy little laptop thing. I like Photoshop, because it actually works at scale. We used GitHub. We used Slack. Probably the most important tool that we used outside of the engine was Slack, because we were in constant contact 24/7, myself included. This was not a, I teach my class from 2 to 4 in my office hours or 10 to noon on Thursdays. This was, you can reach me anytime, all the time. It's on my phone, and as everyone that never worked with me knows, my phone is always in my hand, right? And a whole host of other tools. I counted 22 tools at one point that we actually used. That's just kind of how building games actually works, right? Everyone's like, did you use tool X, right? It's like, yeah, we probably did at one point. I don't even really remember. Here's what we did and what we didn't do, right? Lots of tweaks. We experimented with whether or not friendly fire should be on, sometimes, all the time, never, so on. We worked around, if you're close to the other person, maybe you all get a speed boost, or a power boost, or a whatever boost, or I don't even remember them all. We had this really complicated, awesome system for how you would, like, if you're close to the rogue, then you're all like sneaky. If you're close to the wizard, then you all gain spell power and all this, and nobody understood it, right? So we took it out. Options, right? We experimented with, should it be a twin stick, right? So like you move this way, you fire this way. And we'll talk about that. We experimented with heavy attack, right? So originally you could just like use the heavy attack all the time. And then people were like, is there another button besides heavy attack? Because why would I use it? Like just, you know. So we had to make like kind of a charging system for like, you can use it and then you have to wait a while before you can use it again. And then how would we illustrate that to players? We did a lot of work around difficulty, about balancing it being too easy, too hard, too this, too that. And then we had a bunch of people that wanted an inventory system, because you were going to pick stuff up all the way through the game and like store it and track it and be able to put it in your bag and this, that, and the other, and it never made it in there. More of what we didn't do, right? We had health bars in 4 corners, in 4 colors, the way they are in the game right now, in the first week. And then we made the icons for those, that interface, over and over and over again, because we could just never get them right. We have a state manager in the game that I'm convinced was written in hell. Because you're never actually sure what state the game is in, whether it's in a menu, whether it's not, whether it's this or that or the other. And the thing was we wrote it in week 1 for that throwaway prototype and kept it all the way through, right? We decided really early on we were going to have a hexagon world, and Aaron and I would not budge on that, much to Jim's chagrin. And the last minute little player, like sort of enemy, like little health bars over the little people, right? And then when they get hit, like a little -5 goes up over their head. That was kind of the Hail Mary, like at least people will understand that sort of thing. And we had a lot of visual quality issues around UI, because we didn't have like a super skilled painterly 2D artist in the class. And we were doing all these icons, and they were actually, you know, okay, but they were like graphically vector iconic sorts of abstract representations of things. And then we had this very sort of quasi-realistic rendered style in the world, and it just didn't go together at all. And we tried this, and tried this, and tried this, and tried this. It did not work. So I painted them. And then Aaron made them into like all the little rollover states and all of that stuff that had to happen. Right? And you know, people criticize some of that because they say, well, it's not just a student project then, because Andy did part of it. But I think what that did is that made it not theirs and not mine and not my idea and not theirs. It made it ours in a weird kind of way. And I sort of like that. I'm working with them, not just professor, students thing. Yeah, all right, said that. So we also did a bunch of playtesting. We did playtesting informally. Those are Jen's kids. Right. With Joe, we did some playtesting where we brought in other folks from different schools or different events that we could capitalize on to make it happen. We play tested it with Warner Brothers, because that seemed like a good use of their time. We play tested it with the president. That was weird. Explaining to Bill the origins of this game. And at the end of the semester, we had a core, playable, decent-looking thing. We had a class project that any class, by any measure, was going to be an A for a class project. Right? Good job. It had no achievements, it had no platform integration or testing, it didn't have any bosses, it had like 1 item, very few props, and a whole list of UI bugs, and there were a couple ways that you could crash it, but other than that, it was perfect. right? And at that point, we reviewed it for viability, right? And this is the first thing that happens in Magic that's a little weird, because I regularly get people show up to Magic and they say, I have this great idea, will you pay me to make it? And I say, no, right? And they're sad. And they're like, well, why not, right? And I'm like, well, because you got nothing so far, right? And we hold ourselves to the exact same standard, which is if you don't have something that proves the viability of something, why are we going to invest in it? And I cheated a little because I hired Rob, right? So, on the edges, right, whatever. But this is what I want to illustrate, right, which is people always ask me why Magic exists and how that changes the equation. This is how. So up here are the students in the class, and it's an IGM class, and I'm an IGM professor, and I'm teaching IGM things. And that stops right about here. Right? And then we have a whole bunch of full-time people in Magic. And then we have Rob that we hired as a co-owner in the studio. So that was fall. Then we had Intersession. So in Intersession, we brought back all the team leads and hired them full-time for a month. You'd be amazed what you can do full-time with 6 people in a month with no distraction. I mean, the cafeteria wasn't even open. Right? You could do anything, right? And then we had spring semester, and then we had summer. And everything below that line, one way or another, was Magic making it happen financially, with resources, with space, with time, etc. Right? So being able to lift up something that happened in a class and project it forward for what it took to get it out the door is a very complicated equation. Right? And we did a couple other things to help uplift it, right? Like we entered them in the Intel Challenge. Good job, guys. They won a thing. But I gotta be honest, nobody in the actual industry would super pay attention to them winning a thing if we didn't also have a booth where they could go and play it. Right? So every year we sponsor a booth on the show floor where people can actually pick it up, put their hands on it, and play it. And that is exactly where some of our publishing deals came from. So people heard about it, liked it, were excited by the concept, but until they actually put a controller in their hands, no deal. Right? And then we did a couple of other little events, like that Imagine RIT thing. It's fairly popular there. Kind of sickening. So we had Intersession, right? I just talked about full month down in the steam tunnels, right? Moles and trolls, never see the light of day, I believe is the quote. That one's for Jen, by the way. Yep. So that looked great, and we were very happy, and then we ran face first into platform and certification requirements. And those words don't even make sense to most of the academics in the room, right? They're like, wait, what? So it goes like this. The Xbox, first off, we ran it on an Xbox, and it, you know, Unity, write once, deploy anywhere. So we ran it, and it ran for 1.5 seconds, and I clicked a button and it crashed, which was my fault. If you just didn't try to move, we're good. Right? The second is the way that these platforms think about a player as a user. There's a very specific way of being a user on like Xbox Live, right? And a whole bunch of requirements that go with that. And our game was built around none of them. Oops. So, in part, polishing platform took as long as the meat of the game. In part because we didn't know what we were doing. This was the first time we were doing it. And what did we know about building an Xbox game? In part because the game had no real overlap with the way that Xbox Live thinks about a user, because they care who's playing it and what achievements they've earned. And we frankly didn't, because it was like, you're on a couch with 3 other people, whatever, right? And in part, that's just the way it is, right? It's that 90-10 rule. It's that, yeah, we built the whole thing and it all works and it's all wonderful, but that last 10% of polish, making it feel right, is so much time, right? So we could have, if we'd known what we were doing, pushed to Xbox like all the time. We could have started day one and said, this is going to be an Xbox game, and every week we're going to push it to Xbox and make Rob test it on Xbox and tell us what's wrong with it, and so on. But I'm not convinced that would be a good use of the first 16 weeks. Because you're trading that time against, you know, ideation and against different features and about trying to move things in and out and all of that kind of stuff, right? So I'm not convinced that would be great, but if we were only going to build Xbox games, designing them with that in mind for the next go-round is probably a thing. So I alluded to this, right? Write once, crash everywhere. What we found was some versions of Unity work with our input plugin, and some versions work with our game, and some versions work with the Xbox. Perfect. We went through 19 versions of Unity, point release by point release, to find the one that would satisfy all three of those silly little things. We had to file an exception with Xbox that we were using an old version of Unity, which it was old meaning, you know, like in the same year, but not the latest and greatest. Because whenever they roll a platform update out, they just forget that anything ever happened prior to that, because they want to maintain currency. In the future, we will have to think about, when we build stuff, testing it on the version that we're using, rolling it backward to make sure that it's compatible with the base, like, major release, and then also looking at whatever beta version is current, and making sure that it works there because that's what's coming. That has some really huge implications for the way that folks like IGM think about lab imaging, right? If we didn't have this lab, we could not have built this game. Because this lab, Chris, I'm very fortunate, Chris just says, yeah, I don't care about the rules. You can just be admin, whatever, right? Install what you want, and if you mess it up, we'll just wipe the machine and go again. And that's not how it works in the academic department. But if you're gonna do this kind of work, you can't do it with, oh, I rebooted the machine, so Unity is reset, so oops, right? We went through this process where you would build it, you would upload it to the Xbox store, which took hours. You would then pull it down from the store, which took reverse number of hours, right? Debug it, watch it crash, try to figure out why it crashed, and then try it again. So that took about 2 days in cycle for a single test. So our solution was just do a bunch of them in parallel and try to figure out like which one was which. Yeah. Thanks, Eric. Yeah. All right, part 2. Oh my God, we released a game. So, first thing we did is we made a launch poster where we tried to illustrate all of the things that went into that. All the events, all the software, all the events, the platforms, all the different organizations at RIT, all the things we use, and so on and so forth, right? And then we saw it online. And we were like, oh wow, it's in the store. I'm totally emailing my mom, right? Yeah, right? And we were super proud, because we were like, it's in the store. And everybody said it couldn't be done, so we were really excited. And so I was really excited it was on Xbox. And then we started to freak out when we saw it like listed next to WoW on some of the Game Press sites. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I'm pretty sure we didn't pay for that advertising. Jen, did we do that? No. Okay, so that was strange. And it turns out that whenever you release a game on Xbox, they just start seeding it to all of their media partners. Whether you're like really ready or not. So, all right, cool, it's great. And then a bunch of people started to play it and started to have commentary and feedback. And the internet is a mean, horrible place. So there's some public praise. There's some accurate critique. There's some fanboy flames, kind of all wrapped up together. So what's interesting to me about this is a couple of themes came out in
in the feedback, right? First off, we did not build a single-player game. The whole point of the game is to play it with another person, so that you have this weird trade-off between, like, we're a team, we're a team, we're a team, oh, we're not a team anymore, and that feels awful, right? But we put a single-player mode in it so that you could practice and learn the controls so that when your friend comes over, you can, like, really get good at it, right? And then a bunch of people just, like, played it on single-player mode, and they're like, the game is so unfair. Like, it's so hard as a single player to beat this thing, right? And you're like, well, you're not actually supposed to beat it. The whole point thing, and then, yeah. But they didn't get it, right? It's not a PC game. It's not made for a PC environment, right? And that's what this thread is all about. This thread is about why the hell do you need a controller to play this game? This game is on Steam. You should be able to play it with a mouse and a keyboard. And we were like, if the whole point is to play it with another person, if you played a two-player game on a mouse and keyboard, like it's not great, right? Like there's a reason for what we did, but that was misinterpreted, right? Because of the platform, they assumed that it was something else, right? It's not really a dungeon crawler. You're not supposed to go from room to room, kill all the things, grab the loot, and then move to the next room. It's not the way the game is played, right? It's a race to kind of get away from the enemy. The enemies just herd you towards the goal, right? And you have to stay alive long enough with your friends, and so on, right? It's an arcade game, is what it is. It's Gauntlet with a twist, right? It's in my head, it was built around the fact that you have a stick and a button, and you're standing up in front of a thing, because that's how I grew up. That's my understanding of what that interaction should look like, right? So it's a throwback to my childhood, but it kind of missed some people in the way that they were thinking about what they were used to. They probably had a different childhood. They played different games, came to it from a different perspective. Oh, and we also made one other mistake, which was we listened to Steam about the thing that they were doing, because we were talking to Steam about all the things that they were doing, and that their big push at the time that we first were doing the ideation and core concept for the game was they made a Steam box. And a Steam box was going to go in a living room just like a console, and you were going to play it with a controller on a big TV from a couch, and I was like, yeah, that's the game. Like, this game is going to be super popular for the folks that are early adopters for Steambox. Perfect. Steambox, not so much. Didn't really materialize in the market the way that they said that was going to happen. Steam controllers, sort of, not, yeah, but no, right? Like, it's not the big hit that it was. And so we find ourselves in this weird spot where we constantly, to a certain market segment, are explaining to them that we are, in fact, not Diablo. Oddly, right? The game we made was not this game, but they want it to be this game. There was just a review this morning that was like, this game is good for what it does, but it doesn't do enough to actually be considered a game. It should have like a leveling system and a loot system and a way to play online with your friends. And I was like looking at it, I was like, yeah, so basically, I mean, you just should have made Diablo, right? Like that's what you're telling us, right? So it's weird when you look at the demographics of what it is. So sales and data and things, right? So we sold about 275 on Steam, and that was like a big spike and a trail off. And you know, we sell a few more every day, but whatever. Maybe we'll get bundled into things on Humble, and that'll create another little spike. Xbox, on the other hand, we sold, that's now up to about 1,500, and it's still climbing. We sell about 50 copies a day, and it keeps going on, right? Because it was designed to be played in a living room with a bunch of people on a couch. And so when that mechanic hits, it kind of works, right? It's a very different response market to market between console and computer. Geographically, it's about the same response, which is totally predictable because of the localization, right? It's an English game, it's in English, it is only available in English because we don't have a department that can, you know, move it from anything other than English, so it's going to sell in English-speaking countries, and that's kind of where it is. So the Seesaw Breakdown, right? So one of the things that I heard when we started Magic was we were trying to take student ideas, capitalize on them, and make money for the university while using them as slave labor. It's an interesting thing to be accused of on a Tuesday, right? So, okay, sure. The real way that that works out, right? So like we've made about $9,000 on the game so far, right? Hopefully we'll make lots more. We spent about 17 on all of the co-ops that we needed to actually shove the thing out the door. So right away, oh yeah, okay, so we're kind of in the hole. The point of Magic Spell Studios in its connection to the academic world is not necessarily to turn profit. It's to prove capability, it's to work with our academic programs and our partners, right? To kind of move the ball forward in terms of genning up the way that we think about game production and digital media distribution in this area, right? It's 17K if you count the co-ops. If you like really count, right? It's an astronomical amount of money, right? We didn't include the cost of the commercial software that we bought. We just happened to use for this project, but we're not leveraging it against the cost. We didn't include the cost of the Magic personnel that were involved, right? Like me and Jen and Chris and Brenda and all of that. We didn't include our marketing budget, which is zero, right? But it's zero except for the fact that we buy a booth at GDC. So it's not actually zero, it's a lot. It's enough money that I got in trouble for it every year I've ever done it. And then I do it again, and then I get in trouble for it again. And kind of go, it's cool, whatever. So some thoughts and critiques. First off is perspective, right? So there's like 16 reviews on Xbox Live. They're evenly distributed on a reverse bell curve. People love it or they hate it. And if they love it because they played it with other people and they got the narrative. And if they hate it because they wanted it to be a twin stick. Straight up, right? There's 5 reviews on Steam. There's 2 up, there's 3 down. The interesting thing about Steam reviews behind the scenes is they'll tell you how much time they've spent in the game. So the people that have spent more time tend to like it, and the people that like turned them off, they turned them off immediately, and they're gone. There's a couple of formal reviews out there. There's a 7, there's a 5, there's a 3. There's a handful of really, really hilarious YouTube and Twitch streams. There's one guy that will only play the Rogue, and he will only play it when he wears a sweatshirt. And I watched it over and over again, right? It's just the funniest thing ever. Hilarity on price point. There's a guy on Steam that is like railing about the fact that we charge $4.99 for this, and it is only worth $2. We had cheated him out of his hard-earned money, right? And I'm like, dude, it's like less than a pumpkin spice latte. Seriously, right? Like those $2 are, they mean something to him in a deep, dark way. Should we have made it a twin stick? Maybe. The neat thing about it not being a twin stick is you can only fire in the direction you're facing. And so if you're watching, you notice when people turn around to stab you in the back, right? Because you're like, Jim, right? That doesn't work if you could just like, I'm running forward, but I'm shooting backwards, right? Like it just doesn't do its thing. But so many people have said, like, that's the reason I don't like it. Like, maybe we should have done that. And we tried it, right? And we didn't really, I didn't like it best, right? And Rob was like, I can go either way with it, right? And, maybe we should have done that one. I don't know. It's easier for gamers for it to be a twin stick. It's easier for first-timers and kids for it not. Should we have released single-player mode at all? I think that's kind of an open question. Because a lot of our bad press is about it being unfair as a single-player game, so maybe we shouldn't have put that in. I don't know, or somehow appropriately labeled it to be practice mode or something, right? Designing on console is really different than designing on computer, and that has nothing to do with the technology, right? An Xbox is mostly a Windows machine, slightly modified and slightly less capable, and it crashes more. Consoles are coming around again as part of the universal app process in game land. It's like XNA all over again, except that you can build in pick the language. can do it in JavaScript, you can do it in C#, you can do it in C++, you can go to the metal. Any commercial kit now, you can just flip a switch and say, hey, it's a dev box now. It's kind of unfortunate that IGM gave away the capability to have consoles in their labs and let ITS reclaim all the IP addresses. Because now we were ahead of that curve, and now that curve is here. Right? So I'm looking at how to get a lot more Xboxes so that we can do that. And Sony has promised that they're going to have their version of it, whatever. But the real difference is that you're designing for a living room, not a 2 inches from the screen play experience. Those are fundamentally different things, particularly when you include more than one person. Right? And then, of course, you have to abide by the first-party rules of Stone Tablet game creation. Right? Thou shalt treat your users like this. Thou shalt surface their custom avatar picture in the following situations. Which, by the way, crashes Unity. So it's great. But the public perception and cachet of being on a platform is hugely outsized, right? Most people at RIT have absolutely no idea the work involved in putting something on Xbox. But the provost is like, man, that's cool. Right? You don't even know why it's cool, but it's cool, right? And there's a lot of that, right? So, is the game too hard? One of the things I'm convinced of is that people never found in the options menu the fact that you could change how hard it was. Because I watch the Twitch streams of them playing and I know which setting they're on just by looking at it. Right? They are not in lightly salted mode. Right? They're not in brutal insanity, but the default was to start at mildly unpleasant. And I gotta be honest, lightly salted is way easier. Right? Lightly salted is like, Cal can almost beat it in single player. So Cal's my son. Right? So, the class thing. So, the class is interesting because every time we do this, there's a wildly variable input. We have no idea who's going to sign up for the class. So what we can achieve and accomplish in a given class period is kind of, I don't know. Right? The credit doesn't scale to the actual activity. If you ask any member of the dev team, they're going to tell you, oh, I earned my 4 credits for that class, just like every other class, right? No, right? They killed themselves to make this thing. What? No overtime, right. The timeline is a constant battle, but it's also a help because it scopes what we're able to do. We had to very concretely scope this game down to just say, this is about this core experience of this one little moment of betrayal, right? We didn't do inventory, we didn't do this, we didn't do that, on purpose, right? What we're doing in the class is still wildly misunderstood in the following sense, which is students will come to me and they will say, why don't we have creative control to pick the game that we're making, right? And we do a lot of work at Magic about helping students make their own games. We're doing it with Dan and Gary Games, Super Darrow Deluxe. We're doing it with Nick and Wes and Yes and Games. We're doing it with several other projects. We did it with the co-op program. We did it with lots of things. We're not doing it here specifically because I want people to have the experience of coming in, working on a project that is not their core idea. They didn't originate with them, but having the experience of making it their own. Because that's the same thing that they're going to be asked to do in production experiences in industry. Right? Activision's not going to say to you, let's all just think up an idea for a game. Okay? They're going to say, here's an idea for a game, but you need to internalize it and make it your own so that you can contribute deeply and meaningfully to this thing. So I'm very proud of the fact that we succeeded through teamwork in creating a game that speaks deeply about the ways that organizations break teamwork. Last bit, an eye towards the future. So where do we go now? All right, some people got it. Right? So first off, that zero marketing budget thing. I think if we're going to do this continually in the future, Magic has to scale and think about how it actually can work as a studio and market things in addition to just putting them out there. Maybe that means doing it ourselves and creating a budget for it and some personnel to do it. Maybe that means working with external agencies or both. I've been thinking a lot about formalizing QA as a part of the course and the co-op experience, because right now it was like, well, I played it a ton and then we all jumped on it and played it over and over again. But QA was nobody's specific job and role. It's a two-edged knife, right, of more student involvement in design, because to some extent that is production, and to some extent you want the ownership over somebody else's core idea, right? It becomes a shared idea, is what you're really looking for. Anything bigger than this, I think, is impossible in the current structure. I don't think you can take one course and scale it much bigger than this. So that means either maybe it's 2 courses, maybe it's a course stretched over a year, maybe it's a course stretched or combined with a summer experience, maybe we used Intercession as a wonderful tool in this, so our IT has killed Intercession so we can never use it again. It's an interesting way to reward the use of good tools. But how that actually works is kind of interesting. We're always looking for our more firsts in terms of national competitiveness and landscape. We were the first people to publish on the Xbox One platform. That is like the weirdest concatenation of criteria in order to make something first, right? Like, it has to be a university, it has to be on this version of this console at this time, like, you know. USC did the same thing with PlayStation this summer. We both published on Steam first party, as did Utah. Currently, that's the competitive landscape that's only going to expand, right? And so we're thinking about, I don't want to give up our lead. I'd like to be first. My team likes to be first. Jen likes to be first even more than I do. So we're trying to think about what the next thing is. One is we're making another game, right? If you're going to do this, you're going to do it repeatedly. Hi, team. Right? So they're making the next thing, and the next thing, just to follow on like that whole trend of where this game comes from. The next game is about finding solace and beauty in depression and decay. Just throwing out there that art games are personal and so on. Thank you to the Magic team, because without this, we would not have had this game. Thank you to the incredible students and co-ops that made this possible. Thank you to IGM. This would not have been possible without IGM. It's their course, right? Their student body, it's their program. I like to think it's pretty good. Thanks to sponsored research. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work in figuring out the logistics of how to get paid when you have stuff on commercial channels. There was a nice, hilarious moment when I did things like, Dear RIT, here is the title license agreement from Microsoft. Please sign. Right? And they said things like, I think we should modify this as follows. And I said, good luck with that. Right? Knock yourself out. It was not modified. It's not a thing that you get to do. F&A, right, for week by week, month by month, pulling the reports, making sure that we earn our royalties and so forth, and Brenda for dealing with that. Do it. Paige, Daniel, Rowan, Simone, Emma, and Callan are the children of the core team here. They were our additional playtesters and told us everything that was wrong with the game several times over. Bill and Rebecca for coming by and championing both the game and also just what we're doing in general. It's nice to have the president in the corner. Most importantly, the hairdresser of Mr. Liam Middlebrook. So Liam was in our course, and Liam got a haircut one day and was late to class. And we gave him such grief over it that his hairdresser wasn't part of the credits. And then immediately following, he decided that he wanted to do graphics driver stuff and left. But we remembered that his hairdresser was hugely important to bringing camaraderie and levity to a lot of the things that we did. I don't know who his hairdresser was, but we should find them and give them a copy of the game. I think it was right down here at the thing, so we should see if we can do that. I also have a series of colleagues at the Adobe Educational Network that I work with very closely, and they were kind enough to keep me going in the wee hours of the morning by reviewing a lot of the interface work and design work that we were doing and that stuff. Darkwind and Working Band, believe it or not, you guys are hugely thanked in this. They remind us that what we're doing is important occasionally, without which I think we probably would have quit by now. So that's helpful. And all the players and fans. And most importantly, my wife, who got us that cake. Because it was amazing, right? This was 18 months of the hardest work that I have ever done. 22 software packages, 3 lab images, 2 versions of Windows, frickin' Unity version, hand cramps, waking up in the middle of the night with hand cramps because we're drawing this silly thing on a Wacom tablet, piles of broken code and UI fixes, Slack at all hours, every hour, all the time, but a great game from a great team, and that's the talk. So with that, it's Q&A.
So I'm going to read off the softball.
Oh, sweet.
52 games for Angry Birds, 51, is that it?
Yeah, something like that, right?
They were able to do that because of institutional knowledge. We are always struggling to keep our institutional knowledge. You, of course, in the main team, gathered some. Is there a way that we can maintain some institutional knowledge among our student population as we go through iterations of this?
Right. So I think part of that is we keep doing it. That the more mainstream something becomes, the more that students are connected to it and understand it as a part of the way that things work. So if we publish this Xbox game and then never publish another console game, right? It'll be, oh, that cool thing that happened once. Nobody knows how we did it, etc. If we do one every year, then you can always find somebody to talk to do that thing. I think the other thing is alumni networks, right? So it's always fun when I get to come in here and talk in my own little round thing, whatever. But a lot of people that work on this game are still here. They're still local, right? Jim is at Darkwind, at least for now. Hopefully forever. Right? And I say that selfishly, because having somebody that had this experience as a student, that is now an alum, that is still around, means that you can come back. You can talk to students about your perspective, what this was, what worked, what didn't work, what to do, what not to do. Oh my God, don't take that Phelps guy's course, it will wreck your life. Right? So that's another way of preserving that knowledge. There's a ton of knowledge in our alumni network that I don't think we tap very well. We just call them up and ask them for $5 once a year, whatever. Right? So I think that's a part of it. I think the other thing is write stuff down. Right? So we have this treasure trove of 28 gigabytes of whatever, right? And I have all of my notes about how we taught the course, and I have all of that stuff. I don't frankly know what to do with it. But figuring out what to do with it and finding the time to figure out what to do with it and a way to give that to other faculty that want to do this is key. Right? That's one of the reasons that we're doing the Post Mortem talks, is to try to at least begin to unpack that and take a look at it better. Yeah. Nice softball.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So you talked about in research studio, because it was a research studio, right?
Yes,
okay.
It was a research studio. I remember that now.
Because the ownership thing that you talked about, is it the student's game or is it my game, that actually fits really nicely into what research is supposed to look like in a university. Because research that's done with students belongs to both the faculty and the student. And very often the student is working on an idea that the faculty member has, but contributes to it and helps make it work. And so I think that's a really easy argument for you to make, especially if it's a research studio, which is that's how research works. That's what we're doing. This is a collaborative process with ownership on both sides.
Right. I think I think the issue that we have is that the terminology is correct up to that point, but we're not just doing research in the sense that we're trying to understand a concept and illustrate a proof of concept. We want to push it all the way out to public consumption, and that means production. And I know that there really isn't a conflict in the way that I see that, but there seems to be a perceived conflict, and the terminology is not understood by the student body, right? So we have this situation where people come to me and they say, I thought it was production studio because what I want to do is production. But what I want to do is I want to do that thing that those guys did last year, right? And so that doesn't jive, right? And then you've got folks in CIS that are like, I signed up for the course that I thought was this course, and I wound up in this other course with somebody else that's not the magic thing, and like the whole thing functionally is a mess. I don't think we're confused about the purpose. It's more an implementation snafu.
And then one other small follow-up is, are you thinking about your zero marketing budget? We have a whole program in new media marketing, right? And you know, if we start thinking about marketing as much a part of the development process as code and art, then incorporating marketing, in fact, incorporating it right from the very beginning so that they really understand the game. They're not coming in at the end and saying, what is this? And why does it work the way that it does? And they are thinking all through the semester, they're doing parallel work, right? They're saying, what are the outlets where games like this get advertised in? And what does good marketing look like? And you know, what can we collect along the way that will help us with our final launch, which is the launch of the marketing materials?
So, I mean, I have talked to Adam about that. I've talked to a couple of folks in Saunders about that. I've talked to Rich about that. That is definitely something that we're looking at in terms of designing a marketing plan. The other side of that is the institutional shift that you need to implement the marketing plan, right? Because outside of these walls, marketing costs dollars, right? And that means allocating dollars towards that goal, right? Which currently our IT both doesn't do and has a lot of institutional barriers built up around individual units ever doing that. I can sidestep some of them with the studio, but you know, the core function is, right, like anything that goes out with the RIT brand is basically controlled through admissions. Right? Even University News is modified a little bit by the admissions stamp of approval and what that means. Jim knows because he's dealing with this right now from the School of Individualized Studies. So it's partly the design issue of what a good marketing plan would be, and I think there's lots of capabilities to work with lots of groups on campus, but part of it is operationally the shift that we need institutionally in order to implement whatever we come up with, right? And that just takes a different mindset and challenging some administrative and functional barriers within the organization. Somebody have it.
Yeah, so just again to the general marketing and the communications director, I had my every 3 months visit with my general practitioner today. I walked in and said, hey, you guys made an Xbox game, that's pretty cool. So there you go, marketing, free marketing.
It's like we do a great job of putting it on the news because that leverages the brand name of the university. Right. But are we actually marketing it to potential purchasers? Those are not the same thing. Chris?
Yeah, I would like you to comment on something I observed from I'm watching where that knife is.
Yeah.
About the CERT process, because I think a lot of people have in their minds one picture of what the day-to-day CERT process looks like when you're dealing with a company like Xbox, but there's sort of what's the romanticized version of that and what's the reality of every day dealing with that.
I have a slide about this, and I didn't accurately describe it. Oh, I have a slide about this. All right, I can't find it. Anyway, So the slide had a picture of the Xbox and a picture of Unity, and in the middle it had a text box that said, fill this in later. And you would have thought that I didn't finish my slide. But no, in fact, I copied the documentation for how that process is supposed to work. From the Xbox documentation. And cut and pasted it. Right? There is literally some of the documentation that said, fill this in later for how this is supposed to work. And when it was crashing and we were looking at what this is going to look like, and this is like a gazillion-dollar platform, right? This is Xbox. And we are not the only people to have built a game in Unity that needed to run on an Xbox, right? You would think that would be a fairly established thing. Right? So this whole notion that because something is big and shiny on the outside, that it is a well-oiled, well-functioning machine on the inside, not so much. The second thing I will say is that in dealing with this world, it's been really interesting because everything is sharded. There's a group that handles dealing with, does it run on the Xbox? And then once it runs, you put it in a sandbox for Q&A and cert testing, and that's a different group. And then you submit it to that group, and you get back a report from that group of here are all the things you need to fix. And you go back and forth with them through your project manager at Microsoft until you get it the way it needs to be. And Eric is having post-traumatic stress flashbacks right now about the process, right? And then they say, great, you're greenlit, right? And then you work with another group to set your timeline and your launch plan and your release date and your embargo and your, all of these things, right? And then you work with another group that says, I would actually like to know if anyone is buying our game. Can you give me access to the analytics and the marketing reports? And then you work with another group and you're like, those reports about the temporary day-to-day things that you're not sure of and won't certify, but that we look at so that we know what's happening, those are great, but I would actually like to get paid now. Could we actually get a real report, right, so that we can invoice you for the thing that we sold on your platform so that you can pay us? Different group, different group, different group, different group, different group, right? And it works. Right? And I understand why those are different groups, because internally to Microsoft, I'm not sure that they have a lot of overlap. But externally to us, it feels kind of disjointed. Right? It's just the way it is, right? You're not going to change it. You just got to find a way to react to it and respond to it effectively. I can't imagine at this stage, right, if we said, yeah, we're going to put it on Xbox and PlayStation and PC and mobile, what that looks like, right? I mean, that's nuts. But people do it all the time in this space, right? So figuring out the apparatus of what that looks like and how our students are prepared to go into that world and deal with that world effectively is really interesting. So Eric and I learned a lot in those last couple of weeks of the summer when we really had to grind on that stuff. Fair? He won't even speak. He's just going to smile and yeah. Okay. I think that's an answer. Yeah.
Okay, so this might be a little tricky. Kind of touched on this already. It has to do with motivation. So you have students coming in to work on someone else's idea. How do you motivate your students to be more of the students?
Right? So the very first thing that I tried to convey was the core concept is, I'm coming to you with the core concept. Aaron and I did a 10-slide pitch deck the very first day of class, right? Here's the thing that we think could be a compelling game experience. This is what we're after, right? We then said, think of all the stuff that's not in this. There's an awful lot that's not in this, right? How do we even interact with the core mechanic if it's not in it? Right? It should follow this narrative arc, but how it actually felt in your hands was absent. Right? So to a certain extent, it was take it and make it yours. Right? Figure out what it actually built, right? And in building it, build it in a way that it is in your image. Right? So we would constantly have discussions with the class about what worked and what didn't work and that kind of stuff. The other thing that we did was we said, all right, so we pitched it the first time. And then once we had a playable where we could start to iterate, we had every other member of the team get up and pitch the game themselves. Right? Because you can't build what you can't own. Right? And of course the escalation curve was the pitches got better and better and better and better. Right? So you look at the last one that a student did, it's way better than what Aaron and I could have done. Right? Because we didn't really know the game that we were building when we pitched it. Right? They did by the end. Right? And we even said, like, we're gonna grade everybody on doing their pitches, but the curve, our expectations if you're last are like way up here, right? So of course a bunch of people were like, I'm doing first. But really, right, it was about learning from each other what everybody thought about the game, what everybody was feeling about the thing that they were making, right? So that was another tool that we used, right? Because it's ultimately about internalizing something and feeling it yourself, owning it. Right? You can be motivated about something that you own. You almost can't, by definition, be as motivated about anything you don't own. I don't think any one of our co-ops would be like, yeah, I did it for the money. Because you can make way more money. Like, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is sort of in relation to the fact that anybody can really sign up for this, and you don't know who you're going to get. Do you ever foresee sort of a time when you'll have maybe a couple of ideas that have gone through some basic pre-production, sort of a grab bag, so that if you have the team with half a Jason, you can do the tech-heavy game, and when you have a team with 5 Jasons, you can do the art-heavy game. You think you'll ever get to that point?
I hope so. I mean, I aspire to like having like a whole little thing of like potentials, right? I also aspire to like exporting this to other people, right? Like maybe next year I don't teach the Magic Research Studio experience. Somebody else comes in and teaches it, right? Because they're going to do something with it that I would not do because they're not me. And I think that would be really healthy for the organization. I think that, so I think there's that. I think there's also, like the one that we're doing right now started in a much looser place. Like the idea just wasn't as fully gelled, right? And so we decided to back up, right, and do a little bit more sort of ideation work in the beginning to try to really compact that down, right? And we're like just now getting to, here's a first playable build, here's kind of core mechanic and illustration. And it took us 5 weeks? Is this week 5? Week 6, right? So it took us 6 weeks instead of 3, right? Because we started in a looser, less defined spot. So sometimes it, you got to adjust with it a little bit. Right? I wish I could say that I had all the answers. But yeah, it's a forcibly fluid thing. Right? It's art.
So, a variation on Professor Cassioli's question, right? So, for people who don't do games, that stage where Andy had little boxes running around the students, we call that the gray box, because that's all it is. So, could you see yourself coming in at some point, 1 year, or having whoever the Magic Studio Research television show, the studio course thing is, right? You see, would it work better, less better, maybe if you walked in with a gray box as well as a slide deck, and then try people to get people to fill in lines?
It could. It would certainly illustrate more interactively what the mechanic is. I want to balance that against like people feeling like they had even less of their own self in it. I'm also kind of excited about, I mean, one of the reasons that we decided early on that Aaron and I were like, we need to have a direction the day we start, was because we only have 16 weeks. And to do something at a polished enough level in 16 weeks that we can decide whether or not we're going to uplift it, right, is really hard. And if we spread that over a year, like maybe we could do something where it started in a more collaborative, less focused way, but we need that time. Right now the structure is such that we don't have that time. So I think there's educational value in the way that we're approaching it now. I think there could also be educational value in approaching it very differently. But if uplift to commercial scale is at the end of that, I think you have to change the ways, the tools that we have to work with there.
I mean, I can even see the argument of coming into something where you are at the end of the first semester.
Right.
Something that's got the core mechanic and the core stuff there. It's going to okay, now do the polish and do the next version.
All right. In the back, you would. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, Andy.
Hi.
Again, so for lack of a better term, I feel like you are in that position that every kid who's ever wanted to make a game dreams of, where they have the idea, they have the concept, and they push it, and they have people to help them along the way to develop it. And like frankly, I say this for myself, I'm pretty sure lots of other students who are in your course feel the same way, but it's like that's where I want to be in some day. So I'm just wondering like what your thoughts are on how you play into that role, what kind of got you there, like what you do, what you had to get good at in order to do it, and also building off of that.
What was that last thing? Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, right, like Magic is a little bit kid in a candy shop sort of thing. I think it goes back to those couple of slides about you see the public success and you see the outward facing stuff. You don't necessarily see all of the inward behind the scenes failure and frustration. Yeah, absolutely, I'm in a very privileged and very fortunate position. Right? I get to do things in my academic career now that I would not have dreamed I would be doing when I started my career here. At the same time, I probably throw out 99 ideas for every single thing that I have to gauge what I think I want to do or where I think we could be successful with what I think we can actually reasonably do and potentially accomplish, right? I mean, my first love is long, puzzle-based, exploratory, graphically rich RPGs. I want to build one like no tomorrow. Like, take a few years, hire like half the people out of IGM, tell the department, go hire a bunch of adjuncts, right? And we'll just sit down and work on this thing. And in 5 years, we will have made something that is like, Diablo 8, only way better, right? And that's going to be amazing, right? I just don't think we can actually do that internally at a university. It just doesn't fit, right? So I think that while people see, you can do anything you want, I can't do anything I want, right? I've got a lot of responsibilities to various constituencies that frame what we're able to do. I have tried to become adept and aware of navigating those responsibilities and those obligations in ways that still result in the success of my team, the success of the students involved, the forward success of the reputation of the university, etc. But at the same time, I think it's easy to say, you get to do something, and again, I do. So I'm very thankful for that. But at the same time, there are a number of constraints around what we're actually able to do. Space, time, cost, etc. As well as form and function, right? I had a student once that came up with what was going to be a hilariously awesome game, right? It was called Babies with Rabies. And it was amazing. I really wanted to play it. It would be successful, right? I can't actually release that with like Made by Magic and RT. Just can't do it, right? So I've actually taken a lot of heat about Hack Slash and Backstab because of the name of it, because of the perceived violence of it. Even though it's trying to say something, I hope, when people actually internalize the message of it, kind of profound and could be used very positively. If you go out, like when we made the Chronicle of Higher Education, there was this guy in the comments that was like, this is a bunch of guys, and only guys, right, that made a violent video game. Why the hell should we be excited about this? This is ridiculous, right? And we took the high road there in responding, but functionally, right, like there are a bunch of those concerns. I hope that was some answer to your question. All right, let's do one last one, and we should probably get out of here. Anybody? Last question of the evening. Joe.
She saved me a piece of that cake.
I did not.
What the hell, man?
Well,
It's not a wedding. You don't sit the top.
You snooze, you lose. And, I think you were sending us pictures of lovely weather where you were at the time. So.
This is lovely.
All right. Eric, really good case. All right. Last real question, because Joe, right?
So, being the only CS student who had to go through a lot of external steps just to even be able to be a part of this. Are there any future plans to make it easier to help integrate any of the other schools or colleges to do
Right.
Can you repeat
So
the question?
the question was, Eric's a CS student, and when he first tried to register for my course, he was told that he could not because ITM, CS, whatever. And I was able to work something out with Geigel because I know Geigel and we collaborate. And we kind of worked around the edges in ways that probably were not totally kosher. I think technically you took a course with Joe and I gave you a grade for it.
I did graphics work.
Right. And that works in one-off situations, but it's not institutionalized in a way to collaborate. And the things that I would say is, one, our new strategic plan says multidisciplinary something like 85 times in 10 pages or something absurd, which means that we're supposed to actually figure out how to do exactly that. And so I think there's institutional pressure on the programs to say, how do you actually functionally make collaboration possible, right? When you don't allow cross-electives and convergent work to happen. There's pressure at the faculty research level, there's pressure at the curriculum level, et cetera, but it's going to take time because we're a big organization and that's how we roll. One of the folks in the audience I'll single out is Jim, who runs School of Individualized Studies. That's been doing a lot of that kind of work. There's a reason that I signed on as a fellow for the SOIS, right? And that's because I want to provide more opportunities for students that float between all of these little institutional walls that we keep making. Right? In my dream world, right, we should have some folks from IGM and some folks from CS and maybe some folks from SE, given all of the travesty of the way that we did the software engineering process. Possibly some folks from CIS that we lucked out that we got Jason, right, who was hugely talented, and he was able to mentor some other folks on his team about the workflow and the kinds of things we were building. That was luck, right, as much as it was skill. And we need to institutionalize ways that we can bring these groups together reliably, not just haphazardly. And I think that's a challenge for us, the faculty, the staff, within these programs. We know it's necessary, we're just not yet at a point where we're succeeding in that. So I know that the provost has just stuck me on some multidisciplinary collaboration committee, which has yet to be announced, which is his fault, as I understand it. Oh no, it's not. Right. So there's some hope there, but I think that functionally we're going to have to kind of inch our way forward over time and try to get to where we all, I think, recognize we need to be. All right, so with that, thanks for coming.